Okay, so this panel, like Zach just said, is called What ZK Can and Can't Do for You. We're going to be specifically talking about a type of zero-knowledge proof called a SNARK. These are two of the world's most preeminent SNARK builders, Abhi Shelat from Northeastern University and Justin Thaler he's a research associate at A16Z. So I'm going to start actually with Justin because...
And also a professor at Georgetown University.
Exactly.
Just down the road.
That too. Sorry, I forgot about that one. I'm going to start with Justin because he has I think a really useful analogy, a metaphor for what a SNARK is. We're not going to try to spell it out and unpack the acronym. We're going to go straight to the analogy.
Yeah, sounds good. There are two properties of SNARKs, or some kinds of SNARKs, that people can find useful. So the title of this session says ZK, zero knowledge. That is about privacy. So that's like, I prove to you that I know some data. It might be sensitive. It might be the password to my bank account or something. I know some data. And zero knowledge means I don't leak any information about that data other than I know it. Right? So like the trivial proof would just be to hand you the data. You can then check it yourself. But that leaks the whole password, and then you can steal all my money or whatever. Right? So zero knowledge is about privacy. SNARK is an acronym. The S means succinct, okay? And this is about like efficiency, okay? So the analogy I think Mike is referring to here is cryptographic compression, okay? So a succinct proof is a proof that's really short and really fast to check. Okay, so again, if I just sent you the data I claim to know, you could check it directly, but it could be a lot of data, okay? And it could take a lot of time to check it. Right? So to give an application that might make this concrete, every time you visit a website, you download a whole bunch of certificates that kind of attest that the website being served to you is like the right website and not served by an attacker. Right? So today you download those certificates and you check each one is what it should be. Right? In the future, you could have the website just prove to you it knows the certificates. Right? And this way, it doesn't have to send all the certificates to you, and you don't have to check it yourself. So this is what I mean by cryptographic compression. Right? And you're compressing sort of two things. It's the data that the untrusted prover is claiming to know, so that all that data doesn't need to get sent to you, just a really short proof. And you're compressing the work of checking the validity of the data. So it's kind of a twofold win. So so SNARKs without ZK can be useful because of the cryptographic compression, and then SNARKs with ZK, possibly also without the compression, can be useful because of privacy.
Yeah, so Justin and Abhi are working on two very different kinds of SNARKs, or different application spaces, put it that way. And Justin is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Justin's more concerned about succinctness than Abhi.
Yep. I care about the privacy.
That they headed in different directions, that they're focused on different application spaces is interesting because they started in a similar place as academics, working together on a protocol called the SumCheck protocol that Justin calls half of a SNARK. The easiest way to understand all this technical stuff, though, is in the context of a real-world example, and that's why Abhi's here. So let's start with him. Abhi, can you tell us about the work that you have done with the Google Wallet?
Yeah, sure. So I'm speaking as an academic and a personal thing, not representing anything Google will do in the future or has done or any of their opinions and so forth. However, I was granted the opportunity to work on Google Wallet. Thank you to my boss, Stavan, who allowed this and saw the future of privacy. Basically, and Google announced this this July, and it's been like 2.5 years of work that culminates with this. But the idea is that today in Google Wallet, you can hold your digital identity. So many states in the United States, about maybe 13 of them, issue digital driver licenses that you can use at the TSA, for example, at the airport. This morning, Boston, I used mine instead of my physical ID. So these states issue you a digital identifier, digital ID, a DMV, a mobile driver's license. It has all of your identity attributes that you currently have and more. And now essentially the idea is you can use this in place of your real ID, your physical ID, to prove things about your identity online and in person. So for example, in person at the TSA, they accept my thing. You can also onboard any US passport holder can basically hold their passport to the back of an Android phone and essentially get a digital identifier based on the US passport that you can also use at the TSA. Now, the thing that Google Wallet does is they now are going to allow you to use that digital identity online to prove attributes about yourself. So you can prove things like your age is over 18, your age is over 16 for like social media checks. You can prove things about your address. For example, if you're getting things shipped to you, you can prove that this is in fact you and this is your address and so forth. Now, the problem is if you do this in the standard way, which was designed before we began working on this, you would unfortunately, the people who designed this protocol had a lot of things, a lot of goals in mind, but they had one small gap in which if you use your current digital identifier, digital ID, you would leak essentially a global cookie, a cookie that would basically allow all of the websites, the relying parties, to track you across the internet. There are some mitigations for that, but essentially the issuer of the credential, the DMV, they would always be able to track wherever you went. If they, for example, were to subpoena a healthcare website, show me all the people that used their digital ID to get access to some age-restricted content, then if through that subpoena, they would be able to figure out exactly who went to that particular website. So that is a privacy problem that we recognized and we understood was problematic. And Google started working on it a few years ago. I joined that team to work on it, and we built a zero-knowledge proof that allows you to essentially prove attributes of your digital identity to any website without revealing any extra information. So currently, I don't know if you've gone through this, if you need to prove something about your identity, currently the way that's done is you take a photo of your ID and you upload it to the website, and then they go through some process where they actually have a human check that it's, a person. You do a live selfie, etc., make sure that you're the same person on your digital ID. That process is broken because A, it takes you time, and more importantly, you've uploaded a copy of your driver's license, which unless you have 24, as the Lazarus group, the last speaker talks about, right? Essentially, most websites can be broken, all but the very strongest ones that have like 24/7 worldwide operations, all of them get broken into. And so essentially, if that's sitting in a database, that driver's license is lost. So to summarize, currently, the status quo requires you to take a picture if you want to prove you're over 18 or if you want to prove anything about your address or your gender, etc. And that's a problematic privacy position. We built a zero-knowledge proof that actually runs on the phone and allows you to prove aspects of your digital identity to a relying party. And what Mike was referring to is like in 2016, Justin and I wrote a series of papers on this very same topic. He's gone and improved it. He's had tons of great ideas on how to improve that, and that's kind of the work he's worked on, the succinctness part of it. And I've sort of worked on the zero knowledge part of it. Very few extra ideas since our 2016 paper, but enough engineering to make it work on the phone. So that's essentially the thing I've worked on.
Sorry if this makes you kind of repeat some of the things that you said, but I'm just going to ask it a slightly different question, which is, if it's possible to not get too far into the weeds, can you explain what I guess, for lack of a better term, the key cryptographic components? I'm wondering, like, what does the government or the credential issuer sign? Like, why?
Oh, good.
Why are they signed, and what's being proven? How do you know that the person is the owner of the phone? Also,
good. Okay, so a lot of great detailed questions about how this works. So one of the main constraints we had is we wanted to deploy this in a way that gives users privacy, but does not change the way that anybody does anything right now. So no changes to how the DMV operates. That was very critical for us to actually deploy this, because essentially changing the mind of Texas or DC or Virginia or Massachusetts, it's like basically impossible. So what they currently do, what they've currently decided to do, essentially, when you onboard your driver's license, you, again, open either Apple Wallet also has this, but doesn't have the ZK, a Google Wallet. You essentially open up Google Wallet, you say, I want to put my driver's license in. You essentially take a video, you do a bunch of tests to make sure that you're the person in front of the camera. Like they ask you to move your head, you take a few pictures. You do actually take a picture of your current driver's license. All of that information gets encrypted on your phone and encrypted under the key of the DMV. And that information gets sent from your phone to the DMV. The DMV has a process by which they get these applications rolling. They have people essentially checking that this person is asking for their ID and this person is in fact, they have of course your picture. So they in fact match that you're the person in the video, that you're moving the head in the right direction, etc. When they say yes, they essentially issue you a signature on all of the attributes in your driver's license, your age, your address, all the things you see, as well as several other attributes like organ donor and a bunch of other things. They sign that, they give you a digital signature, and they send that back directly to your phone. Now, one other important thing is if you just did this, this would be a completely broken system. Somebody would hack their phone, which I don't know how to do it, but some people, like Lazarus Group people, know how to do it. They would hack your phone, they would extract your credential, and then they would sell it on the black web, or you could sell it on the black web, and then anybody could essentially pretend to be you. That wouldn't be great. So, in fact, there's one other precaution meant for this. Every phone that you have, and everybody in their phone, has what's called a secure element, a piece of hardware in that phone. In fact, phones are probably the most secure computing platforms today because they have that secure element and they check the boot process. They do a lot of measures to ensure that they don't get hacked. So that secure element's a piece of hardware that has essentially a digital signature key on it. And when you onboard your digital ID, that piece of element creates a public key, and a private key stays in hardware, and that public key gets sent all the way back to the DMV, and the DMV puts that into your digital credential. So in addition to Abhi Shelat, 42 Brinkton Road, blah, 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 birthday September, blah, 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 they sign all of that, and they put your device public key, which is the key that's on your phone, in that credential, and they send it back. What this means, this is called device binding. It means that you can only use this credential if you have the ability to sign with respect to that device public key, which means you can only use this credential if you have the phone onto which the person took the selfie and took all of the particular measures. So there are a bunch of countermeasures, a bunch of technical things to ensure that, but ultimately, this mechanism is what the credential is today. And now, when you present it to someone online, you essentially also prove that you can basically create signatures under this device public key. Essentially, that you're presenting the credential from the phone onto which it was issued by the DMV. So through that sort of transitive trust, complicated statement, you can guard against people doing, easily trying to break your phone and just copy it. They would have to actually break the secure element at the heart of your phone, which, it's possible, but I mean, it takes you disassembling the phone and, roughly spending about $200,000 to sand it and sand the chip and try to extract.
What if someone steals your phone?
Yes, so it also has a biometric. So the credential is protected by either the Face ID or your phone ID, as well as pins. You can put various levels of protections on it. Yeah. Every time you use it, you have to essentially put a biometric in order to engage that secure element.
Cool.
Great questions, by the way. You know a lot about this field. So.
There was this, there's a real world example. I want to come back to a real world example.
Okay.
Earlier this year, there was an app called T. There is an app called T where women share dating-related information about men, and there was a breach. The data stolen included selfies and images of driver's licenses, which the app had used to verify that new users were women. So could you use this technology to prove that you're a woman?
If anybody knows the T people, I'd love to get in touch with them. But yes, this is exactly the scenario we're intending to protect against, so that applications that want to restrict the content based on some identity attribute, they do not have to take pictures of IDs anymore. They can use this digital ID protocol in order to do that.
One more question for Abhi, and then I'll go to Justin. How many different kinds of identity credentials are there, or could there be, and to what extent can they be used? Could they be used in combination in a single instance?
So right now there can be an infinite number. Any organization can issue credentials. The Google Wallet supports that, but but we don't allow that yet because so far only the ID, the passport, and the mobile driver's licenses. And what's in the future is the European Union has this thing called the EU Digital Identity Initiative, EUD, They are defining a bunch of standards on how they are going to do state-level identity credentials for all of the EU in a way that interoperates. And I have the privilege of working with them on also doing zero-knowledge for the way that they produce these credentials.
Super interesting. Yeah, we're going to talk more about that in the following panel. The EU wallet. Okay. So before I turn back to Justin, I'm going to make a technical point about this, which is for a SNARK to work, you need a prover, the thing that makes the proof, and a verifier, the thing that checks the proof. So for what Abhi is building, the prover is the phone. The verifier is a age-restricted website. But these, like I said at the beginning, Justin and Abhi took divergent paths. And Justin's working on very different SNARKs. So the question for Justin is, can you explain what's different about your SNARKs versus Abhi's SNARKs, and why is that?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the SNARKs I'm working on, they're not specific to blockchains, although a lot of the sort of most popular applications of these SNARKs are in blockchains today. I'm bringing up blockchains because they just raise different kinds of applications than the sort that Abhi is focused on, right? And how are they different? I'd say two ways. So one is in blockchain settings, often these SNARK proofs they're stored and verified on chain. Okay, so that means there are hundreds of thousands of nodes following along with the Ethereum blockchain, and anytime there's a SNARK proof used in an Ethereum context, if it goes on chain, every one of those hundreds of thousands of nodes has to store the proof like forever, basically, and check that it's correct. Right, so you just don't want the proofs to be that big, and you don't want them to take all that long to check, right? So, Abhi, I think your proofs today are a few hundred kilobytes, right? That just can't do that really in the blockchain setting, right? So we want the proofs to be kind of shorter and faster to check, and so that's something about the verifier. You want the verification to be nice and fast and cheap. Another difference is that not all of the applications in the blockchain setting are really about privacy. Some of them, for example, are about scalability. So we want the blockchains to be able to process more transactions every second. But at the same time, we don't want the blockchain nodes to have to, be super beefy machines that only live in data centers, right? Because then our blockchain isn't secure and decentralized the way we like it, right? So this starts to mean that, we try to get untrusted parties that are not part of the blockchain to do hard work that they then prove to the blockchain nodes was done correctly. Okay, and this means the statements getting proven here, they're just more complicated, right? So they take longer to prove. The logic that's getting proved was run correctly is just far more complicated. In the digital identity and credential setting, you're basically just proving a digital signature attached to a message that contains a birth date that was more than 18 years ago, right? That's about as simple a statement as you're ever going to prove. If you're scaling up a blockchain, it's just orders of magnitude, more complicated and just more computation that you're proving you did correctly. Okay, so those are the performance considerations. And then the last thing I'll say is something about usability. So for these very simple privacy-focused statements, you can there's something called a circuit, right? These zero-knowledge proofs, the prover gets applied to a circuit. Don't worry about what it is. The main point is it takes an expert to, if you want to, prove a digital signature, attached to a message satisfying some predicate, it takes an expert to write a circuit capturing that statement, right? And that's how Google's approach works. And that's fine for these very simple statements. But if that's how Zcash works, right? There's a circuit in there that's getting proven. As you move beyond these very simple privacy, application statements, that becomes untenable. And you want something that's much more developer friendly, where a developer can just write a computer program that takes as input the data the prover's claiming to know and checks that it's correct and says, prove, right? And like the proof just comes out the other end, and that's the sort of thing I'm working on now. So to summarize, we sort of, we need to worry about prover speed. Obvious prover is fast, but like it's just not as important when the statement's really simple. We need to worry about how expensive the verifier is, and we need to worry about like usability so that you don't need a PhD to write a circuit, every time there's a new statement to be proved.
Cool. So like I said, you focus on two different application spaces, and this question might be a little clumsy, but is there a place where the work that you two are doing converges? I was asking Abhi before about how many different credentials there are, how many could be used together. We're talking a lot about financial risk management at this conference. Could you imagine an instance where institutions are requiring lots of credentials to the point where actually the SNARKs that you're building would be more useful toward that end? Justin?
Yeah, I'd say, as digital IDs gain adoption, and people just start, you put something in someone's wallet and people will run with it, right? So, eventually more and more complicated things will be getting proven on these credentials, and it'll become very hard to like maintain these circuits. And, if there's any little teeny bug in the circuit, then security is completely out the window because the prover will be proving it correctly ran the wrong thing. So the whole protocol becomes attackable. And so, I think, for any individual simple statements, the circuit-based approach can work, and we've seen Zcash is a long-lived project, and the Google Wallet's digital identity will likely be a long-lived project as well. But in the very long run, things will just get more complicated enough that the developer experience and maintainability will be important. Maybe.
So I will talk about. I totally agree with what you're saying. I'll tell you a dream application I have that requires essentially your kind of tech. So, by the way, Justin's stuff is about succinctness, not necessarily privacy. My stuff is only about privacy, not necessarily succinctness. And when the two actually, it turns out you can build the systems using exactly the same components. So you can actually also combine and get both of these things. And I'll tell you an application that needs both that and some sort of blockchain or some sort of common knowledge. And it was inspired by the events of earlier this year. But I would like a system whereby it's called ZK tax. So you can prove to the government that you owe exactly this many dollars of tax, and without disclosing any specifics about why that's exactly how much tax you owe, without having to give a Schedule A and a Schedule B and a schedule all of the transactions I made, all the stock that I sold yesterday and today, etc. I don't have to disclose all of those facts. I can just disclose the exact amount. And of course, that system requires a lot of infrastructure. It requires me to prove that I'm reporting all of the income. So there has to be some record of all the income that the W-2 has to be somewhere on the blockchain in some encrypted way where I can refer to it and make sure that I'm covering all. So a lot of stuff that I don't know how exactly to do. But that is a use case where you're combining many credentials. Like I work for this company, I got a W-2 from them and W-2 from them and this. And I also had a side hustle where I was selling this. This is all my income, plus these are the trades I made, plus that's like multi-credential scenario that also requires common knowledge about about all the W-2s that are out there in a way that's privacy friendly, and the goal being that you can't just have some random situation where someone with a laptop can walk into a building and download everybody's W-2s for the last 10 years. And that's essentially prevented by that kind of mechanism. And I don't see that as too far-fetched based on the tech and the future that I see with these ideas.
You have anything to add?
And I'll add one thing, which is a little in the weeds, but still I think worth adding, which is that these like circuit-based protocols, they are actually like a subcomponent of the non-circuit, like kind of friendlier developer experience protocols I've been working on in recent years. So these things are, the techniques are the same, they're not incompatible, and final thing I'll add is there's been a belief in the technical community that if you avoid circuits, there's like a lot of overhead, right? Like if you have a developer, kind of specify this circuit that's doing exactly what you want to prove and nothing else, that's going to buy you performance. And I think it does, but it buys you less than you would expect, right? So I hope that in the future, like the non-circuit stuff gets fast enough that the benefits will outweigh the, real but not massive performance downsides.
Interesting. Okay, so this panel is called What ZK Can and Can't Do for You. So the final question for each of you, and let's start with Justin and then we'll go to Abhi on this one, is what is the most important technical limitation or obstacle to zero-knowledge cryptography that you feel deserves more attention?
Yeah, I'm gonna, I guess, say more than one. Sorry. So one is bugs, right? So I think at some point this technology will sort of reach the same status as encryption schemes or digital signatures, where people just use them. They pervade our digital infrastructure, and no one's worried about how slow is the prover and is the thing secure. But the reality is that these protocols are orders of magnitude more complicated than today's digital signature schemes or encryption schemes. And so they're full of bugs. We got to be very careful until we develop some confidence that there aren't bugs there. I guess the other thing I would say is whenever anything is proved with this technology, it's what's being proved is like I ran this computer program correctly on some data, and so there's no wiggle room, right? So we talk about compliance, and privacy are not in tension when you start using ZK, and that's true. But the compliance notion has to be completely precise and programmatic, and I worry a little that the legal world or the policy world has kind of deliberately built in wiggle room for human interpretation because some of these things might be impossible to formalize precisely, and then this technology forces you to formalize it completely precisely. So.
Interesting. Abhi?
Wait, your bottleneck you pointed out was human error.
Human error is I'm kind of saying it's a human wiggle room is kind of can be a good thing in some settings. It can also be a terrible thing in other settings, and maybe even in the same setting it can be both.
Yeah. Okay. And the question was, what are the bottlenecks that we see?
What are the biggest technical obstacles or shortcomings or things that need to be still developed, worked out?
So this stuff has been worked on since at least 1990, or at least maybe 1984, if you look at it even more generically. But the techniques the modern techniques start in 1990. They've been worked out, and I think there's room for these are very technical things. I think there's still some check, which is the basic mechanism that both of us use, is the best mechanism for succinctness and for zero knowledge. That's our theory. It's been our theory since 2012. My theory with you since 2016, because you convinced me. I think there's I think we're very close to the full understanding of that protocol. There are these special things like your de-randomization technique. I think that's the 7 selection of thing. So there are a handful of other ideas that will make this slightly faster, but nothing that it's all usable right now. That's evidenced by both of our engineering efforts. It works on a phone. It works on a blockchain. It works. Other people have demonstrated. Muthu has demonstrated on other applications. So I wouldn't say there's a real technical bottleneck to deploying this. I would say people don't know about it. Some people are afraid of new things, and so there's a policy and sort of a acceptance type of thing in regulatory contexts, which I was hoping this audience would have some insight on.
Yeah, let's actually open it up to questions in case anyone in the audience has any questions for Justin or Abhi. I think we will have some.
We got one back here, and we'll work our way around. Here we go.
Howdy. Thank you both for the insights. I guess one question is, where do you see NIST or other government organizations kind of potentially playing a role in guiding both government, but then probably the wider industry on what cryptographic standards to adopt for ZK, if that's even necessary? And then maybe as a follow-up to that, anything around do you see any impact that quantum has, given that NIST has been putting out a lot of like guidance around like when we need to be ready for quantum in like 2030, what standards would be, or what cryptographic methods that should be adopted before then? Is there anything that impacts ZK in that context?
I'll give a quick answer. A, NIST has a call, if it's still running, November for like the first round. So NIST will standardize this. B, the European Union, like ECCG, as well as ENISA, as well as a few other, ETSI, those are all standardization groups that I'm involved with that are trying to standardize a ZK-based solution for these European wallets. Our system is post-quantum already. It was one of the design requirements that the ZK system had to be post-quantum, even though the statements involve signatures that are not. Justin's can be easily made to be, at the cost of making the commitments, the proofs larger, you can make them post-quantum secure as well.
Yeah, I can add let's take the quantum thing. I can elaborate a little bit more on that. So one thing I'll clarify is, there are two kinds of, security properties of ZK proofs. So one is the ZK, is it privacy preserving or not? Okay, and so the non-post-quantum ZK proofs, the privacy aspect actually is post-quantum. Okay, so you do not have to worry about a future quantum computer. There's no for encryption, we have to be really worried about quantum computers, even if they're 30 years out, because of what's called harvest now, decrypt later. You store the message. China's hoovering up all of the US's traffic, I'm sure. And if they get a quantum computer 30 years from now, they decrypt it then, and they'll learn secrets the US government wanted to keep for 50 years, right? You don't have to worry about that for ZK proofs with privacy, right? You can't take a quantum computer and break the privacy, So it's just the security. And so as long as, if these proofs come with a timestamp that says this proof was generated, now in 2025, and we don't have a quantum computer now, that's fine. Yeah. So we don't have to be too worried, too urgently switching to post-quantum, secure ZK proofs for these reasons.
You can have someone rewrite history. That's the problem, no?
Yeah, you need the timestamp. You need the timestamp so that you don't have someone in the year 2080 when the quantum computers are here acting like this proof was generated 50 years ago when they weren't here. But anyway, the other thing I'll say is the big worry for me now is the bugs. Right, and so I think we can, make the post-quantum proof systems just as, have the same confidence they're bug-free as the non-post-quantum proof systems. But I do worry that, basically, we'll get hit by an asteroid, by a car because we're walking down the street looking for the asteroid. The asteroid's the quantum computer and the car's the bugs, right? So I like to clarify where my focus is in the short term.
A couple more questions over here. There we go.
Thank you. I appreciate both your insights, so thanks for that. I guess you guys are your grand snark masters. It's very cool. I was thinking through this. So are you saying this is already live with A2P and X402, or it could be soon?
A2P?
So Google's agent payment network. If I have a wallet that could work, so basically if I want to set up a wallet to work with agents, and that wallet will only be to work with agents and do what I want agents to do, and keep it separate from maybe a universal ID as you're defining it, and then keep that separate from a wallet that would work in a blockchain space like X402. Is that kind of what you're saying this would be built for, to retain privacy in those three areas?
So your use cases are ones outside of my consideration, and there are people working on that, I guess, agentic part of it, if that's what you were talking about. The part that I work on and that I have visibility into is today's Google Wallet, which basically only allows you to work using your phone to prove things about your identity online to a handful of relying parties. It's being rolled out, so there's only a handful of places where you can now test this. But what will happen in the future, I'm not sure. I can only comment to what was in the press release.
Okay, cool.
Did I answer your question or not?
Yeah, I get it. So different direction then too. Separate question is so number one, I think that just the data sharing market alone is like 350 billion. That's the websites you talk about saying they don't need to see the data anymore. But in some cases, they actually have a profit stream off that data. Do you see there being pushback there? And then separately, with state government, with ID and DMV, MVA are famously hard to get any kind of tech integration with. They're working with archaic systems. How hard do you see integration at that level?
Well, the thing is, those DMVs are already integrating through a set of integrators, like Fast is one company. They are already integrating with Apple and Google already for this, for the function of going to the TSA and presenting your ID with your phone. So we are building on top of that our zero knowledge layer that allows you to use that same information online. So I don't see that integration point being problematic. EU is already designing this with in mind, keeping in mind how to get these credentials on people's phones. So I think that's not a problem. Your first part of the question was about the data. Like, what economic incentive do websites have to use this mechanism? Well, like there are many websites that need to verify some aspect of your age for their regulatory compliance or their feature set. And I don't think those people want to be taking and processing photos of your digital ID. And so in this case, I think there would be an economic incentive for them to adopt these things. If that's not enough, there's already other privacy data minimization laws, which are at least relevant in the EU, which would essentially nudge them to be using best practices, which would be these protocols. So I don't know what happens to the data brokerage market and how people will, in the future, earn money from our private information, but at least this is one avenue to kind of mitigate those markets.
All right, last one, and then we'll wrap.
What do you view as the role of TEEs and FHE in relation to ZKs?
Go for it.
I view them as complementary technologies. A very good way to sort of protect against potential bugs in ZK proofs now is to also generate the proof through a TEE, and so you have to kind of own both the TEE and exploit the bug. We don't have enough time to talk about the nuances of what if it's just a TEE on its own or ZK on its own, like which one should you go for? And then with FHE, I think the performance in general is still a concern and will be for a long time. You see the application, people are using FHE today, but it's for very specific applications that are super, structured and nice. And so, have to worry about the performance. And then also sometimes the trust assumptions can be an awkward fit, because someone has to hold that decryption key. You can split it up among many parties, but that means those parties can still come together and decrypt all the data. Anyway, so I don't know, there's a brain dump of thoughts there.
Cool. Well, I think we'll end it there. Thanks, Justin and Abhi. It was great.
Yeah, thank you.